"Don't move or she dies!" The words sliced through the marble corridors of Nexus Dynamics at exactly 3:47 p.m. Cole Mitchell's calloused fingers tightened around his wire strippers, every muscle frozen. Beyond the mahogany door left slightly ajar, a scene unfolded that made his blood run cold. A desperate man in a rumpled black hoodie pressed a trembling gun barrel against the temple of an elegant woman. CEO Vanessa Cross stood statue still in her impeccable charcoal suit, her emerald eyes steady, despite death hovering inches from her head. The kidnapper's voice shattered as he screamed into his phone about $2 million and 30 precious minutes slipping away. Cole's weathered hand drifted toward his cell phone, muscle memory from a decade of police negotiations stirring beneath his electrician's coveralls. But what this grieving single father did next defied every protocol he'd ever learned. 3 years had carved deep lines around Cole's grey eyes, each one a testament to loss that had reshaped his world. The morning Rachel died, he'd held 8-year-old Lucas as the boy asked why Mommy wouldn't wake up. Since then, every sunrise began at 5:30 a.m. with burnt toast and Lucas's endless questions about dinosaurs. Every evening ended with bedtime stories and the hollow ache of an empty pillow beside him. Cole had traded his police badge for wire nuts and outlet boxes, choosing flexible freelance work over steady paychecks. When other dads complained about missing Little League games for overtime, Cole simply smiled. He'd learned the hard way that presence mattered more than promotions. The Nexus Dynamics contract represented 3 months of groceries and Lucas's fall tuition at Cedar Falls Elementary. Cole had spent the afternoon rewiring the second floor's aging electrical system, methodically replacing outlets that hadn't been updated since the 1980s. The building hummed with the quiet efficiency of tech workers bent over glowing screens, their keyboards creating a gentle percussion against floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Cascade Mountains. He'd finished the main panel work 20 minutes early, taking extra time to organize his tools. Rachel had always teased him about his obsessive organization, calling his toolbox surgically precise. Now it felt like honoring her memory. The gunman's erratic breathing echoed through the executive suite as Cole processed the scene with trained eyes. Kevin Palmer clutched a 9mm pistol with the desperate grip of a man who'd never held one before. Sweat darkened his grey t-shirt despite the building's Arctic air conditioning. His jeans hung loose on a frame that suggested recent weight loss, the kind that came from stress and sleepless nights. Vanessa Cross remained motionless, her manicured fingers spread slightly at her sides, every instinct screaming survival while her CEO training demanded composure. The late afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows created harsh shadows across both their faces. Cole's thumb hovered over the emergency contact on his phone. 911 would bring SWAT teams and negotiators, protocols he knew by heart from countless similar situations. But those protocols also meant cordoning off the building, establishing perimeters, and waiting. Waiting while a desperate man's adrenaline peaked and crashed, while his finger trembled on a trigger, while precious seconds ticked away. Cole had seen too many hostage situations turn tragic in those first crucial minutes before professionals arrived. His decision crystallized in the space of a heartbeat. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, picked up his toolbox, and quietly pushed open the door. "Sorry to interrupt." Cole's voice carried the easy cadence of a man discussing weekend plans. "I need to check the outlet behind your desk. Building code requires final inspection before I can sign off." Kevin spun around, the gun wavering between targets, confusion replacing calculation in his bloodshot eyes. Vanessa's emerald gaze flicked to Cole, intelligence assessing this unexpected variable in her carefully controlled world. The afternoon light caught the silver threads in her dark hair, revealing a woman who'd earned her corner office through decades of calculated risks. But nothing in her MBA training had prepared her for this moment. or for the quiet confidence radiating from a man in work boots and flannel. "Get out!" Kevin's voice cracked like an adolescent's, the gun now pointed at Cole's chest. "I have a weapon. I'll use it." Cole set his toolbox down with deliberate care, the metal clasps clicking in the sudden silence. His movements held the practiced calm of someone who'd talked jumpy teenagers off bridge railings and convinced armed drug dealers to surrender their weapons. Every gesture telegraphed non-aggression, while his peripheral vision catalogued exit routes and potential weapons. The smell of Kevin's fear sweat mingled with Vanessa's subtle perfume, and the ozone scent of new electronics. Cole's calloused fingers found a screwdriver, turning it handle up in a gesture of surrender while keeping the metal tool within reach. "I can see that." Cole nodded toward the weapon with the respect one might show a coiled rattlesnake. "But if I don't complete this electrical work, the whole building's going dark in about 10 minutes. Power grid can't handle the load on these old circuits." He gestured toward a blinking red light on the wall panel, a detail Kevin hadn't noticed, but Vanessa's trained eye immediately sought out. Cole had finished the rewiring hours ago, but the blinking light, indicating a minor voltage fluctuation, provided perfect cover. His voice remained steady, conversational, the same tone he'd used to convince Lucas that monsters didn't live under beds. "Main breaker's already showing stress fractures. When it blows, every security system goes with it." Kevin's grip tightened on the phone pressed to his ear, his free hand steadying the gun with the desperation of a man clinging to his last hope. "I don't care about your electrical problems. $2 million. You have 27 minutes. The voice on the other end remained calm, professional, probably buying time while tracing the call. Cole recognized the pattern from his own negotiating days. Keep them talking, establish rapport, never make promises you can't keep. But phone negotiations lacked the human element, the ability to read micro-expressions and body language. Kevin's left foot tapped an anxious rhythm against the hardwood floor, while his right shoulder dipped slightly, indicating his dominant hand was tiring from holding the weapon steady. These were details that mattered in the next few minutes. "You worked at Cascade Manufacturing until last month." Cole said the words quietly, watching Kevin's eyes widen in recognition before he could stop himself. "Your daughter Amy is 6 years old. She's the one you're doing this for." Vanessa's barely perceptible intake of breath was the only sound in the room as she processed this new information. Her fingers curled slightly, a CEO's mind automatically calculating the implications of Cole's knowledge, while her survival instincts screamed warnings. The afternoon sun shifted, casting longer shadows across the Persian rug beneath their feet. Cole had made educated guesses based on statistical probability, but Kevin didn't need to know that. "How do you know?" Kevin's voice trailed off, the phone slipping in his sweat-slicked palm. For the first time since Cole entered the room, the gun barrel dipped toward the floor before Kevin caught himself and raised it again. Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes, cutting tracks through 2 days of stubble. "She won't even talk to me. Her mother says I'm a failure, says Amy's better off without." His voice broke entirely, the words dissolving into a sob that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. Cole recognized the sound. He'd made it himself the night Rachel's machines went silent, when Lucas asked if Mommy was coming home for his birthday. "Children forgive easier than adults." Cole's voice carried the weight of personal experience, each word carefully chosen. "They love without conditions, without keeping score of our mistakes." He took a single step forward, hands visible and empty except for the screwdriver he'd set handle up in his palm. Vanessa remained perfectly still, but Cole caught the slight shift in her posture. She was moving incrementally toward the wall, following some instinct or instruction he couldn't yet identify. The red light on the electrical panel continued its rhythmic blinking, providing a metronome for the tension that filled the room like morning fog rolling in from the Columbia River. The phone in Kevin's hand buzzed with another incoming call, startling him so badly the gun jerked sideways. Cole used the moment to move closer, his boots silent on the thick carpet. "Amy drew you a picture last week." It was a guess based on statistical probability. 6-year-olds drew pictures for their parents with the regularity of sunrise. Probably with crayons. Maybe you and her at the park, or playing catch in the backyard. Kevin's face crumpled, as if Cole had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. The gun wavered between targets, no longer aimed with any precision, becoming an extension of Kevin's trembling grief rather than a calculated threat. "She drew us at the zoo." Kevin whispered the words like a prayer. "Feeding the elephants. I took her there for her birthday before everything fell apart. She keeps asking when we can go again." Vanessa's eyes met Cole's across the room, and he saw recognition there, not just of his negotiating skills, but of something deeper. This wasn't random knowledge or lucky guesses. Cole Mitchell knew exactly what he was doing, and it wasn't his first hostage situation. The realization shifted something in her expression, transforming wariness into curiosity. Who was this electrician who spoke with the voice of experience and carried himself like a man accustomed to danger? "What's stopping you from taking her again?" Cole asked, though he already knew the answer. Unemployment, custody disputes, the cascade of failures that followed when life's dominoes started falling. He'd seen it countless times during his police years. Good people pushed past their breaking point by circumstances beyond their control. Kevin wasn't evil, just desperate. The distinction mattered because desperate could be reasoned with, while evil required different tactics entirely. Cole's peripheral vision caught movement outside the windows. Police cruisers pulling into the parking lot without sirens, taking positions behind concrete barriers. Someone had called 911 after all, probably when the shouting started. The timeline just accelerated significantly. "I lost my job, lost my apartment. My ex-wife got a restraining order, says I'm unstable." Kevin's words came in gasps between sobs. "I just need enough money to prove I can provide for Amy. Show the court I'm not a failure." The gun hung loose in his grip now, pointed at the floor, forgotten in his emotional collapse. Cole saw his opening and took another step forward, close enough now to smell the stale coffee on Kevin's breath and see the stubble of missed shaves on his jawline. Vanessa had pressed herself against the wall, her body language screaming flight response held in check by nowhere to run. The sound of her controlled breathing was barely audible above the building's HVAC system. "Kevin, I need to tell you something about failure." Cole's voice dropped to the intimate register he'd once used for bedtime stories. 3 years ago, I thought I'd failed at the most important job in the world. Being a husband, being a father. My wife died because I wasn't there to prevent it. I blamed myself for every choice that put her on that road at that moment. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in her analytical mind. This wasn't standard negotiating technique. This was raw, personal truth being weaponized for peace. Cole's hands remained steady, but she could see the emotional cost in the tightness around his eyes. The building's elevator dinged softly in the hallway, followed by the whisper of heavy boots on marble. SWAT team taking positions, probably with snipers already calculating sight lines through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Cole had maybe 2 minutes before protocols kicked in, and this conversation became infinitely more dangerous. "But you know what I learned, Kevin? Failure isn't falling down. It's not getting back up. You're here because you love your daughter. That's not failure. That's love looking for the wrong solution." Kevin raised his head, eyes red-rimmed but focusing on Cole's words. The phone in his hand had gone silent, either disconnected or muted, leaving only the three of them in a bubble of afternoon sunlight and desperate hope. "I can't go to prison." Kevin's voice was barely a whisper. "If I go to prison, I'll never see Amy again. She'll grow up thinking her father was a criminal?" Cole nodded, understanding the fear that drove men to impossible choices. He'd arrested fathers before, watched them make the same calculation Kevin was making now. Freedom or family, but never both once the line was crossed. The difference was those other fathers hadn't had someone willing to walk into their crisis and offer a third option. Cole's tactical training catalogued the position of Kevin's finger on the trigger, outside the guard, resting along the frame. Professional habit, not immediate threat. Kevin had handled firearms before, probably hunting or target shooting, but he wasn't a killer. Not yet. There's a lawyer in town who specializes in custody cases. Cole reached slowly into his back pocket, producing a business card worn soft from wallet storage. His name is Robert Chen. He helped me navigate the legal system after Rachel died, when I thought Lucas might be better off with his grandparents. The card exchange required Kevin to shift the gun to his left hand, buying precious seconds and reducing accuracy if everything went wrong. Vanessa watched this careful choreography with the fascination of someone discovering expertise she'd never suspected existed. Cole's movements held the fluid precision of a dancer, each gesture calculated to de-escalate rather than provoke. Kevin accepted the card with trembling fingers, squinting at the raised lettering. I don't have money for lawyers. I don't have money for anything. His voice carried the hollow echo of a man who'd already counted his failures and found them infinite. Cole understood that mathematics of despair. He'd done the same calculation when hospital bills arrived after Rachel's funeral, when single-parent income met dual-parent expenses. But Cole had learned something Kevin hadn't yet discovered. Rock bottom provided the most solid foundation for rebuilding. The trick was surviving the fall without breaking everything that mattered. Robert works pro bono for fathers trying to reconnect with their children. Cole's voice carried quiet conviction. He told me once that every child deserves to know their father tried to be better. Amy's going to need that story someday. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of possibility spreading across Kevin's tear-stained features. Outside, the late afternoon light began its slow fade toward evening, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. The red light on the electrical panel continued its patient blinking, marking seconds that felt like hours in the compressed time of crisis. But I threatened people. I have a gun. Kevin looked at the weapon in his hand, as if seeing it for the first time. Horror replacing desperation in his expression. They'll never let me near Amy after this. Cole recognized the moment, when adrenaline faded, and reality rushed in like cold water. This was the most dangerous point in any negotiation, when subjects realized the magnitude of their actions and panic set in. Some chose suicide over surrender. Others lashed out in final desperation. Cole's training screamed for backup, for distance, for tactical advantage. Instead, he stepped closer. Nobody's been hurt yet. Cole's words carried the weight of legal precedent. That matters in court. Intent matters. And judges understand desperation better than you might think. He gestured toward the phone still clutched in Kevin's free hand. The voice on that phone. Detective Rodriguez. She's been doing this for 15 years. She's seen fathers make worse choices than this and still find their way back to their children. Kevin's eyes darted between Cole and the phone, confusion clouding features already overwhelmed by emotional exhaustion. The pieces weren't fitting together in his mind because he couldn't imagine why an electrician would know police procedures so intimately. Vanessa cleared her throat softly, the first sound she'd made since Cole entered the room. Both men turned toward her, Kevin's gun swinging in a lazy arc that made Cole's muscles tense despite his outward calm. I have a son. Her voice was steady, professional, but carried undertones of something deeper. He's 10 years old. There are nights I work so late he's asleep when I get home and still sleeping when I leave in the morning. I tell myself it's for his future. But really? She paused, green eyes meeting Kevin's red-rimmed gaze. I'm terrified of failing him the way my father failed me. So I work instead of parent, because work has measurable success. The confession hung in the air like morning mist, unexpected and strangely intimate. Kevin lowered the gun slightly, drawn into her honesty despite himself. Cole saw the shift immediately. Vanessa had just turned herself from hostage into person, a transformation that changed everything about the room's dynamics. She'd also revealed why she'd moved toward the wall earlier, not following instructions but creating distance while maintaining eye contact. CEO instincts translating crisis management from boardrooms to life-or-death situations. The woman was thinking 3 moves ahead, even with a gun pointed at her head. What's his favorite thing to do with you? Kevin asked the question like a man starving for proof that good parenting still existed. Vanessa smiled, and for a moment the executive mask slipped to reveal something softer. Video games, specifically building things in Minecraft. These elaborate castles and spaceships that take weeks to complete. She gestured vaguely with one hand, the other still pressed flat against the wall behind her. I used to think it was a waste of time. Now I realize he's showing me how to create something permanent in a world that feels temporary. Kevin nodded as if she'd shared a profound truth. Amy loves to draw. Every surface in our apartment was covered with her artwork before we had to move out. His voice caught on the words, grief mixing with pride in a way that made Cole's chest tighten. Lucas had done the same thing after Rachel died, covering the refrigerator with pictures of their family, as if art could restore what was lost. Children processed trauma through creation, building bridges across chasms adults couldn't cross. The gun in Kevin's hand seemed forgotten now, an afterthought to the real conversation happening. They're still your children, Cole said quietly. Custody agreements and court orders can't change biology. Amy will always be part of you, and you'll always be part of her story. He took another step forward, close enough now to reach for the weapon if necessary. But force wasn't needed anymore. Kevin's grip had relaxed, his finger nowhere near the trigger, the gun becoming just dead weight in his exhausted grasp. The transformation from desperate criminal to broken father was complete, leaving behind a man who needed help rather than hostage negotiation. The sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway grew louder, tactical boots on marble creating a rhythm of inevitability. Cole recognized the cadence. SWAT teams moving into position, probably preparing for dynamic entry if negotiations failed. Time was running out for peaceful resolution. He needed Kevin to surrender the weapon voluntarily, needed it to look like cooperation rather than capture. The difference would matter enormously in court, would determine whether Kevin faced attempted kidnapping charges or got the help he actually needed. Kevin, I'm going to ask you to do something difficult. Cole extended his hand palm up, the universal gesture of trust. I need you to give me the gun. Not because you're giving up, but because you're choosing Amy over anger, choosing her future over your fear. Kevin stared at the offered hand, as if it represented a foreign concept. Trust required faith that the other person wouldn't exploit vulnerability, and Kevin's world had been systematically stripping away reasons for faith. His ex-wife, his former employer, the social services system, all had proven unreliable when he needed them most. What happens after? Kevin's question carried the weight of a man who'd learned to fear consequences. Cole understood the reluctance. Surrender meant admitting defeat, accepting punishment, facing an uncertain future. But it also meant surviving to fight another day, maintaining the possibility of reunion with his daughter. The calculus of hope versus despair played out in a corporate office with afternoon shadows growing long across Persian rugs and executive furniture. After you call your daughter. Cole's voice carried quiet certainty. You tell her you made a mistake, but you're getting help. You tell her you love her, and you're fighting to be the father she deserves." Kevin's lower lip trembled at the words, fresh tears tracking down cheeks already salt-stained from earlier breakdowns. The image of that phone call, Amy's voice bright with surprise and joy at hearing from her father, seemed to physically hurt him. Hope was dangerous for desperate people because it required them to believe in possibilities their experience had taught them to distrust. Vanessa watched this exchange with the fascination of someone witnessing expertise in action. Cole Mitchell wasn't just talking Kevin down from violent impulses, he was rebuilding the man's entire narrative about himself, transforming him from failed father to father who'd made bad choices but still had time to make better ones. It was masterful psychology disguised as simple conversation, and it was working. Kevin's body language had shifted from aggressive defensiveness to something approaching relief. The gun hung loose in his grip, gravity pulling it toward the floor. The elevator dinged again, followed by the low murmur of radio communications. Detective Rodriguez's voice drifted through the door, professional and calm, updating her team on the situation. Cole caught fragments. Subject appears calm. Negotiator has made contact. Holding position pending resolution. Standard protocol for hostage situations, but also confirmation that they were running out of private time. Once tactical teams took over, the personal connection he'd built with Kevin would be replaced by loudspeakers and ultimatums. "I'm scared," Kevin admitted, the words barely audible. Cole smiled, the first genuine expression he'd shown since entering the room. "Good. Scared means you understand what you're risking. Scared means Amy still matters more than your pride." He kept his hand extended, patient as morning light, while Kevin wrestled with the decision that would define the rest of both their lives. Vanessa held her breath, understanding intuitively that this moment balanced on the edge of tragedy or redemption. The afternoon sun continued its inexorable slide toward evening, casting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Kevin looked at the gun in his hand one final time, then slowly placed it in Cole's outstretched palm. The weight transfer felt symbolic, Kevin's desperate burden becoming Cole's professional responsibility. Cole immediately engaged the safety and tucked the weapon into his belt, muscle memory from years of evidence handling making the movements automatic. Kevin's shoulders sagged, as if invisible strings had been cut, leaving him smaller somehow, but also more human. The transformation from armed threat to broken father was complete. "Kevin Palmer, you're under arrest." Detective Rodriguez's voice cut through the moment as tactical officers streamed into the room, weapons drawn but lowered. Kevin raised his hands without being asked, finally understanding that cooperation was his only path back to Amy. Cole stepped back to give the officers room while maintaining eye contact with Kevin, offering silent support during the handcuffing process. Vanessa remained pressed against the wall, watching everything with the sharp attention of someone filing away details for later analysis. As officers led Kevin away, he turned back toward Cole with something approaching gratitude in his eyes. "Will you really call that lawyer?" The question carried desperate hope disguised as casual inquiry. Cole nodded solemnly. "Robert Chen will hear from me tonight." "And Kevin?" The arrested man paused at the doorway. "Amy's going to be proud of how this ended. Not proud of how it started, but proud that you found your way back to her." Kevin's face crumpled with relief and grief as officers guided him toward the elevator. Detective Rodriguez approached Cole as the tactical team cleared the scene. "That was some impressive work, Mitchell. Where'd you learn negotiation techniques like that?" Her question carried professional curiosity mixed with suspicious recognition. Cole had been too skilled, too knowledgeable about procedures, too comfortable in a situation that should have terrified civilian contractors. His cover story about being an electrician was wearing thin under scrutiny, and Vanessa Cross was listening to every word of this conversation with the sharp attention of someone accustomed to uncovering hidden information. "I used to be on the job." Cole admitted, seeing no point in maintaining fiction now that the crisis was over. 10 years with Cedar Falls PD, 5 of those in hostage negotiation. I retired after my wife died. Rodriguez nodded, pieces clicking into place in her experienced mind. Cops who left the force after personal tragedy were common enough, but ones who maintained their skills while working civilian jobs were rare. Cole Mitchell was clearly more complicated than his electrician's uniform suggested, and from Vanessa's expression, she was reaching the same conclusion. The office felt strangely empty after the controlled chaos of arrest and evidence collection. Crime scene technicians photographed everything while detectives took statements, but the real drama was over. Cole found himself alone with Vanessa for the first time since entering the room, the silence stretching between them like a bridge neither was sure they wanted to cross. She studied him with the analytical gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating people for their hidden potential and dangerous secrets. "You saved my life," Vanessa said finally, her voice carrying professional gratitude mixed with personal curiosity. Cole shook his head, returning to his toolbox and beginning the familiar ritual of organizing equipment. Kevin wasn't going to hurt anyone. He was desperate, not violent. Sometimes people just need someone to listen long enough for them to remember who they used to be. His hands moved automatically, sorting screwdrivers and wire nuts with the precision Rachel had always teased him about. The routine tasks helped steady his emotional equilibrium after the intensity of crisis negotiation. "How did you know about his daughter? About the custody situation?" Vanessa's questions revealed a mind that catalogued details automatically, looking for patterns and connections that might prove useful later. Cole's knowledge had been too specific, too personal, to be simple guesswork. Either he'd researched Kevin Palmer beforehand, which seemed impossible, or he'd been making educated guesses based on experience with similar situations. The second option suggested expertise that went far beyond basic police training. Lucky guesses based on statistical probability. Cole's answer was technically true but deliberately incomplete. He'd recognized Kevin's demographic profile immediately. Unemployed father, custody disputes, financial pressure. The details about Amy had been educated speculation designed to establish emotional connection. But explaining his methodology would require admitting to psychological training most patrol officers never received. Vanessa's intelligent gaze suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by his modest explanation, but she didn't press for more information. The late afternoon sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows painted everything in shades of amber and gold, transforming the executive suite into something approaching peaceful. Cole finished packing his tools while Vanessa straightened her desk, both of them processing the day's events in their own ways. The crisis had stripped away professional personas and social conventions, leaving behind two people who'd shared something profound and transformative. The question now was whether that shared experience would fade into memory or develop into something more meaningful. "I owe you dinner," Vanessa said suddenly, the words surprising them both. Cole looked up from his toolbox, studying her face for hidden meanings. CEOs didn't typically socialize with maintenance contractors, especially ones who'd just witnessed them at their most vulnerable. But crisis had a way of reshaping social boundaries, creating intimacy between strangers who'd faced life and death together. The invitation felt genuine rather than obligatory, personal rather than professional. "You don't owe me anything," Cole replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely opposed to the idea. "I just did what anyone would have done." Vanessa smiled, the expression transforming her face from executive authority to something warmer and more approachable. Anyone wouldn't have walked into a hostage situation carrying a toolbox. Anyone wouldn't have known exactly what to say to defuse a desperate father. "You're not anyone, Cole Mitchell, and I'd like to know more about who you actually are."